So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, for dedicating us your valued time, spending a whole week with us. It's something unimaginable, and we are so grateful that you are so, willing, sharing, and able to take a little bit of the love that we have from the Douro and from Port a little bit away from us. And hopefully you will also be, as we are, some sort of Port geeks. And just, to make sure that you are all awake and taking a chance, I think that we need to, we should probably, give a good round of applause to the team that has made this madness happen. Everyone that is in this room, everyone that was in Ecus, but I think that we need to put it together for Nicole, that has been the great enthusiast. So now that I made you all clap a little bit and make some gym after the nice meal that we had together, so I will be talking to you about a very, 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 interesting topic, sensitive, the relevance of, port in the 21st century. When I looked at this topic, I was a little bit scared, to be honest. And so what I decided to do was, basically, as I always did, with English stuff, let's go to the source. Let's go to, the English dictionary and try to understand what does, relevance mean, so that I would see if I'm in the same page as you are. So relevance, means something that, has a special spot for someone, has a special meaningfulness, a special significance to you in a certain context, in a certain period of time. So I imagine that you have been, for all of the week, understanding the relevance of port in the different dimensions, from the viticulture dimension, from the cultural dimension, from the socialization dimension, from the business dimension. I'm sure you've heard all about that. You've had all of the team, or a big part of the team with you, telling you all about that. And I thought, what can I bring to this group of, small elite, wine specialized people that they probably don't have as added value. So I was telling a few of you that I've joined the team not that long ago. So, and I spent about 25 years of my life working indirectly with wine and with spirits for the world's largest cork manufacturer. So always looking into wines and into spirits from the packaging perspective and from the way that the product is perceived in the market. So my speech today, my point will not be to tell you about, the quality of the grapes, the terroir, everything that has been done. You've heard Fernando. You're going to have Ant in a while with everything that he can share with you about, the excellent quality of the wines. So today we'll be talking a little bit more about other dimensions. So we know that port is in the world of fine wine, inscribed in the world of fine wine for centuries. It's regarded as one of the world's most prestigious wines, drunk in most special occasions, and a wine that is in the mind of any, connoisseur that praises himself of being of such. And it is inscribed in many of, we could call it, hierarchies or awards or prizes or auction lists. So there's some of the world's most expensive wines that are on that list that are ports, or in this case, you also have a Madeira. It's a long list that I took from Wine Searcher. But it is indeed not only regarded as something that is extremely, important for connoisseurs, but also that is people are willing to pay small fortunes for, having access to these bottles of wines. And, I thought, how can I, bring a little bit of the history here without making myself of a history teacher, which I'm not. You're looking at the map of the first demarcated wine region in the world in 1756 by the Prime Minister at the time, that understood that in order to guarantee, to have a seal of guarantee of the quality of the wines, we needed to make sure that it all starts from the place where you are here today, from the Douro region. And so, even the boundaries, even if they have evolved throughout times, you can still find the landmarks, original landmarks that were put in 1756 in many of the places around here. So this is an important association with the Portuguese history, on the one hand, but wine has already been there for much longer. And so don't bother too much into the readings. I just wanted it to be up there in case you thought it was interesting. So Portugal is a country that has the same border since 1143. These are the oldest stable borders in Europe. And wine, as you see, has been traded since the 12th century. So it's something rooted in our culture. It was cultivated by Romans much earlier than that. But if you look at the nationality, you see that wine was already being traded, since the early days of our country. And of course, we are fast forwarding a lot of time, and we just go back here. We just go forward here 2 centuries. You will see that with this association between Portugal and England, and with port and wines involved, so there are the oldest ongoing, treaties of friendship and trade that exist in Europe are treaties that came from these days when the association between Portuguese and British were made, and wine was traded already since those days. So I mentioned the fact that the demarcated region was made in 1756, which makes it, a very big responsibility and seal of guarantee. But not only we have this heritage and we have this historical relevance for us Portuguese, and I think for the world, as you see, and I didn't picture Obama specifically because, there is any vintage or not, but basically to say that, port is historically present in many of life's important moments, whether there is a birth or there is a very important celebration. It could be a wedding, it could be a friends reunion, a family reunion, but also in all of the, most prestigious moments, whether there is a presidential election, or in this case, inauguration, or whether there is a king's coronation. So it is regarded as one of those symbolic products, symbolic elements that need to be at someone's table if you really think that this is the right moment to be up there. So there is always a special moment to pop that right bottle, and it's very important to understand this relation between the wine itself and also the moment when it was made. And a few of you were making this comment at lunch time about, well, I could only really understand the trouble that you get into to make this wine when I come here. And so it's extremely important when you go to this special celebration moment and you can relate to everything that we were doing around here. So, the cultural relevance and the historical relevance is very important, but in the end of the day, as we understand, what makes the world spin is still, the green bills and the bucks. And so we also wanted to give you the relevance for us. So, wine weighs about slightly over 1% of our exports, about 1.2% to be more precise. And in terms of exports, it's exported to the 5 continents. So you have port wine and Portuguese wine in over 100 countries in the world. And so Portugal has been growing in terms of its wine exports. We still drink a lot. We used to drink even more, although we are already the #1 consumer of wine per capita in the world. But as you see, we export around 940 million euros a year, roughly $1 billion, $1.1 billion, with a big predominance in Europe and United States and Canada. But as you see, there's plenty of other other regions and other markets. And lots of these markets, they have an historical bound, an historical relation of trade that existed between these nations and Portugal, in which obviously wine was traded for other goods that were important for our economy. And port represents about 1/3 of this. So it's extremely relevant. So we're talking about, out of a 70 million liter, you're talking about an export of about 59 million, and that is generating a turnover value of about 320 million euros. So it is very important for our economy, and it's another dimension in which we also continue, obviously, to do all of this effort. It needs to be, obviously, a profitable that investment that allows reinvestment, but it is a relevant topic for us. And so, but in spite of all of this great history, in spite of all of this economic relevance, in spite of all of this cultural relevance, we have been challenged. We've been around, port has been around for a few centuries, and throughout centuries there have been different challenges. So challenges related to, as you know, with wars in Europe that created difficulties, then challenges related with agricultural or, let's say, viticultural issues when phylloxera invaded Europe in the mid of 19th century. And more recently, during the 20th century, after a number of challenges after the Second World War, we started to lose, let's call it, relevance. And wow, what shall we do to deal with it? As you understand, the pinnacle of port was vintage port. And everyone was telling us, well, but port is a complicated category because you need to decant and you need to, have it, keep it at the right temperature, and you need to be able to serve it. You need to have a tongue. You have this, that, and in fact, in order to demystify that and thinking of the on-trade, we thought that we should be making port consumption simple and serving port as something simple. So in the late 20th century, so we're talking about 70s, 60s, 70s, the sector came up with a new expression called late bottled vintage. So it's a top-end wine, but it's a filtered wine that is made with a seal with a bar top in order to be able to reopen, and that you could basically consume in a few weeks' time. You didn't need, as a vintage, to consume it in the next, couple of days in order for us to guarantee that the wine is in perfect shape. So actually, it's very funny that, a project or an idea that came up as a non-trade support, let's say, gadget or element or serving became easily a non-trade product actually, and today most of the LBVs are sold through off-trade channels rather than on-trade. Although we do think that we need to continue to work on the way to have port wine and vintage port, and today with people with your knowledge, it becomes much simpler and easier to have obviously the finest vintages without any issue or without any sign of concern on any list. So, and then we thought a little bit later on, already in the 21st century, that we have great wines that have been aging for years and years in cellars, in barrels, wines that you can not only delight yourself with them, but you could also look at them and just admire them. And we introduced transparency, so which wasn't the case up until 2000, late 2000s, first decade of 2000. So I think the first transparent Tawny ports were started to be launched in 2010, more or less in the end of that decade. And the whole point was really to show premiumness, display luxury, a little bit as we have seen done in other categories, mostly probably in spirits, as you would see in a whiskey or in a cognac, but enabling us to really showcase and use the color of the wine and the wine itself as a vehicle to show its uniqueness. And indeed, it paid off really well because from the packaging and changing a simple thing such as the color of the container in this case made a whole lot of a difference for the way that you perceive and you see the wine on a shelf or in a restaurant or on a shop next to you. So I'll give you another example of things that changed and where we thought that indeed, in order to be relevant and for people to look at it and think that it would be something that you'd like to have, we came up and we're pioneers in introducing the large formats, the 4.5 liter bottles, that today when you go to a restaurant, this is the kind of thing where you see people getting crazy, because once this bottle gets on the floor, it's difficult to go back, at least without losing a third or half of its content, because everyone, oh, what's that? Oh, this is great. Oh, I need to have one. Can I have one? And I've seen this over the last. I wasn't, really mindful of that before joining Symington, and after I saw this, serving and working, people get crazy, and the visibility it has, and again the experience that you can enable, that you can provide, is something amazing. And I think that it was really well done, and it's been drawing people's attention. As I said, once this goes to the floor, it's very difficult to get back without losing much of its content. And so then, more recently, in the last years, and I'm sure you've been listening also a little bit about this, and you've been studying about this, we understood that, as consumers get younger, so let's think this way, because it means there's an older generation of consumers getting out, there's a new generation of consumers coming in, these moments of contact with consumers are changing, obviously. People get their contact with alcoholic drinks in different moments, in different ways, in different places. And we really understood that, in order to remain top of mind and relevant for a younger generation, we needed to come up with the same level of language that you have with a younger generation. And that is through mixology. So it's not that we want to disrupt the industry and we want to create a whole new world out of it. What we are really looking into this is to make port wine top of mind, and to have an engagement from younger consumers that would probably be more attentive to listening to a gin and tonic serve, or vodka and orange serve, or any other drink that you could have on any easier approach situation on a bar or in a restaurant. And instead of it, think of using a craft product, natural origin, that actually is conceived to be mixed. So these type of wines, whether there is the blend series that is a project conceived by the 5th generation, and hence it started with the number 5, because we're representing here the 5th generation entering into business. And in the Graham's brand, the whole goal was really to have mixologists help us think, how can we make a port that is appealable, that is mixable, that has its character, but has this way of getting introduced into people in a different, more refreshing serving, lower alcohol content than you would have, and make people still enjoy it and still realize that this is a port. And so, and reveal all of the values of the Douro and the terroir of the Douro Valley. So we really think that this was a very interesting way to reposition port and keep it relevant to another group of consumers. So, and then obviously using different layers of communication to markets, and Coburn's indeed is a very, I would say, kind of hipster brand. We also played around using more of the craft language and the bartending language in the packaging of Coburn's. That is really very appealing for certain age groups and certain markets, more open to the mixology. And again, all of this adding up to the relevance that one needs to have for this category. So don't forget, this is a category that is around for centuries. We want it to continue to be relevant and to be around for the following centuries. So we need to continuously be looking at recruiting new consumers, not to be afraid of breaking some codes whilst keeping the soul. I think, Ant, you were the one bringing soul onto the table, and this is very, Portuguese, to have your soul on things. And we really wanted to have the Portuguese and port's soul onto these products, so that people can then enter into that world and understand the whole of the universe of port that is behind any of these great brands. So far, so good. Any comments, any questions? Great.
Packaging, changing the packaging was brilliant. I mean, there was not one occasion.
You should have a mic, sorry, otherwise the guys can't hear you. There was a mic here on this table, but I don't see where it is. No, it's Nicole.
Hello.
There you go.
So yeah, thank you. So basically, it's more like a comment. So changing the packaging was a brilliant thing, especially with the mixer series. It's not one occasion that happened. Someone after the tasting said, like, "Oh, can I actually? Do you mind if I take the bottle? Because it's so nice. I'll keep flowers in my room in that bottle."
Yeah.
So both the blend series was brilliant in that. The Coburn's, sort of like the Tales of Unexpected is the same. It's one way of doing it. So there's plenty of others. So you have to sort of show a cool image of port for a certain audience, selling both on-trade and off-trade, basically. It's just sustainability is one thing. So basically, there are the trends that are now appear to be new, but actually port wine has always been part of the trend even before it existed.
Totally.
Natural wine, I can't find any more natural than vintage port, because you just do nothing with it. You bottle it and it just stays there for centuries.
Yeah.
So sustainability as a message is very important. Somehow social responsibility, so being a B Corp for Symington's is good. I don't know if the competitors will follow. It would be nice to see it happening, actually, for the entire category. But it's good to see that someone leads the way. Basically, what else? Versatility, as you already said. Like, okay, it's good to have as a desert wine, but what about mixology? Making cocktails, it's brilliant. That's the question is what channels can you use to actually put this message through, other than actually physically on the bottle, because somehow this bottle must find the way to the consumers.
All right. Well, thank you for all the comments. I will focus probably on the question, but thank you for the comments. I will not make much comments because there's something that I'd like to do with you in a few minutes. But in terms of the channel, so I think we've been pushing all the different channels. So everything that I've shown you has been used on both off-trade and on-trade. Obviously, online is something that we've been a little bit later to adopt, but that we are working quite active on, and which we will be much more present. And I think that undoubtedly, global travel retail is another channel on which we are quite present. If you look on the overall worldwide duty-free shops in any airport, you will find us very often there. Any of our brands there, and it's very important to keep port in that part. What I find is in some so there are some categories that have a little bit more difficulty in striving on, especially on off-trade. When off-trade is more focused not much on the brand side, but on the product side itself. There is some more difficulty in continuing to be relevant. So I think that the fact that we are investing so much on visibility of the product itself and on means to communicate on it, inevitably starts to build up to the relevance of the category itself. So I think we need to continue to do what we are doing. Things like what we are doing right here is amazing, but also doing all of the activations we are doing, initiatives, working together with media, working in festivals, working in global travel retail. So there's so many things that are happening right now, and with the goal to contribute to all of that, I think. But because you are already touching a little bit what we were talking, and because I don't want you to fall asleep after lunch, so now it's my turn, and I want to challenge you. So how would you make port relevant in the 21st century? So I've shown you a little bit what we've been doing so far. Now it's your turn to tell us a little bit about that. And we will make you work. So just before you want to cut into that, we're going to make you guys work. So we have already decided to split you up into 4 groups. And we would like to ask each one of the groups to come up with your point of view on how you would make port relevant. And then we're going to ask you, each team, to come up, or one representative of each team as you'd like to come up and to share with us how you would make port relevant in the 21st century. All right? So if you can get together into these groups that were just randomly picked, I would appreciate. Do you have any backup material? No?
Hello.
Yes.
When I sing, you hear me. So my suggestion is that Group A moves to this table, Group B moves to this table, and you can guess the rest. Group C here, Group D here. You will notice that Group D will actually have 3 elements only because there's a name there that is not here. And the challenge is for you to answer 2 very interesting questions. The first one is, why is port relevant in the 21st century? And the second question is, why is the port business, what is the port business not doing?
Yeah.
So what is it that we're missing? What is it that it's lacking? And then we're going to ask one member of each of the groups to present the conclusions of the discussion.
Aí. Por ali. Pois. Portanto, 10 minutes. If you need more, we can give you more. But
10 minutes to complete the task, and then 5 minutes each group to present the conclusions of the task. Okay? And throughout the 10 minutes, I will be actually going around each of the groups to catch a bit of what is the discussion that is going on.
She wants to make sure you are working. Pronto, mas porreiro. Agora deixá-los.
So, how's the discussion going here? What is it that you're talking about?
So we're talking about why is sport relevant. Should I always directly have to say what we are writing now or not? The idea that's actually discussed is actually that the history of sport is actually it's cool, it's sexy, and everything that has to do with history is interesting, and we should learn from it. And I think we should learn more about history, and especially people that are not really into the port history, that are not really into port drinking actually. And to be honest, also I'm a little bit scared because they were also talking about the port and cocktails, which I'm a little bit afraid of port and cocktails because literally you are like diluting the port. But in my opinion, you're also diluting how fine and pure a normal white port, a normal ruby is. So instead of diluting everything and instead of making it for everybody more, we should maybe concentrate a little bit more on how we have to sell port directly and pure in the way it has been made. So I find it's a little bit like a small negative impact on how we are selling port in combination with cocktails. And I love port and cocktails, but we should not forget how port is in a pure way. And I think if we start selling ports directly with the idea that you should use it more in mixology than only just by the glass, I think that's a huge mistake what we are absolutely doing at the moment. The other thing that is that port on its own it's sweet. So if you look at it in a gastronomic experience, you're directly pushed to the end of the gastronomic experience, which is also something that is can be, in my opinion, can be an obstacle, and especially if you compare it with sherry, because you have different kind of sherries. You have the sweeter style, you have the Manzanilla, the Oloroso. Maybe we should re-inhabit sweet styles more in the moment that we live. But if you look at global drinking, everybody is looking at something that is lower in alcohol, fresher in style, easy to drink. Maybe we should work on that and try to re-inhabit sweeter wines and gastronomic experiences, and not only focusing on how we should make the idea of port easier by adding it on cocktails.
So basically, the discussion the path that you're going to is more about valuing the history of port and also the tradition of port, which has nothing to do with what we were talking about, the innovation, which is a very interesting approach.
What the innovation part can be is basically, as you said, if you want to reinvent it in the gastronomic sense. But because, for example, low and no alcohol is a very trendy thing, but by definition, port can't be low and no because it's a fortified wine. But can we actually reimagine port as, instead of drinking like a glass, serving it like smaller servings it's almost like a fine dining experience where you don't have a large portion, but it's full of flavors, it's full of experience, and just sort of recalibrate it for the fine dining experience, saying like, port wine, you don't drink like a large serving, but it's just for the sip, for the transferring you from the glass to the Douro, would it make some sort of sense? And I'm asking is from you as a professional.
So directly adding the winemaker to your glass, is that actually what you mean? Or yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually like a way huge fan in adding smaller proportions in the gastronomic experience that you're doing, or maybe do like a subtle second pairing, because if you directly give like a glass of port combination with the dish, for some guests it's directly a little too extreme. But like you already said, if you like give a small sip of it and you explain exactly the reason why it works like that, I think everybody will start to think about the port and start to think about the way of how it fits together, about the pairing completely different, and they will think about it, and then they will maybe will start to be more curious directly after that.
Basically adding to that, so can it be like instead of one portion, 3 or 4, so that you sort of compare it, which one you like more with this dish, and instead of experiencing a large amount of alcohol, with a small amount of very extracted flavors and experience.
I'm going to see how the discussion is on the other groups, but this one's very interesting, and I'm going to leave you to complete your tasks. Thank you. Anybody has any comments to share from this group? Where is your discussion going?
Direction.
In a good direction? What is it that what is the subject that you're covering? What is it that you're going?
Well, basically we're still on the why is port relevant, and we are trying to do a brainstorming about words that in our brain it's the definition from port, and now we will exactly. We went more or less in each individually. Each country has a different beverage that are relevant in their countries. Try to bring this into the port wine. So she said that sugar is very important, for example, in some beverages in her country. In his case, alcohol, it was quite important. In his case, it was the minerality and the freshness. So trying to bring that to Porto, and as she said, Porto has it all. The faces, let's call it.
So basically, you're focusing more on the communication side of the business. It's a communication issue, correct?
Could be. It could be.
Interesting. Which is my team. Which is my team. Thank you very much. Yes. Who's next? Can I ask how the discussion is going?
Very well so far. I think
Any points made?
any. Our friend Lukas will. No, it's fine. Go for it.
You're the one talking. Why? What do you want to know about why port is relevant, or?
What have you been discussing?
No, we're gonna ask you the same. Why?
I mean, it's a very interesting topic to discuss because I think the relevance of port has a massive historical, outlook or perspective to it, but that's also maybe the key reason why it's not relevant to this date. And we think that there's a bit of a middle ground or gray area to be covered in terms of port as a traditional after dinner beverage, and look at it from a historical perspective, and the blend that they're using right now, or the number 5 blend, and the port tonic kind of modern as a modern beverage, but putting port more on the map as a main course beverage or pairing, and that's one of the points that we discussed.
Thank you very much. You still have a couple of minutes to finish your task, and then we'll hear the whole thing.
Gives you, it's not really overwhelmed because you don't have other any kind of style. So they 45 language of so it's one idea of short
So like that, so basically it's that to you now. What the board is more
I feel like
Right, guys, 1 minute more.
So what I'm trying to say, I want to offer more incentives to money laundering and sort of like end of chain.
For example, having my acquisition, they do some crazy shit, actually, but the richest company in the world. They do have some piece of
May I suggest a little piece of
Sim, estamos? All right, everyone. Thank you very much. I think we're right at the right moment. So you had a few extra minutes. Very nice level of discussions, and I'd like to see your ideas and creativity bumping up. So let's start by Group A. So who is the spokesperson? I think you were an auto-elected, right, Lucas? Automatically elected. Automatically elected.
After yesterday's presentation.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
you want to use this to write down some key words.
Oh yeah, I'll do the presentation and then. Is it on? Is it on? Check, check. Yeah. All right. So why is port relevant? I think nowadays storytelling is very important, and I think the story that the Douro and that all the port companies and shippers can tell is very relevant, or makes port very relevant. It has such a strong historical relevance and importance that I feel like that's something that really stands out for me. I think looking at the complexity of the beverage, the different amount of styles and diversity of the products that it serves and that it has really makes it a relevant drink. I think so far port is already doing a really good job as a pairing beverage, and now you see the new upcoming style of the cocktail kind of serving of port. So the diversity and the different amount of styles is making port relevant, in my opinion. Maybe this is more on the Symington family, but I think the sustainable and technological outlook that the Symington Family Estates is using makes it, for me, as of, I mean, this trip, very, very relevant, and it's so interesting and so inspiring to see what you guys are doing in this very hard and you know, difficult piece of land, so to say, in terms of the climate, in terms of the soil and the output that you guys have. I think that's a story that's worth telling, and that, I mean, creates for me at least a lot of sympathy and interest into the beverage more. In terms of what is the port business not doing to stay relevant, well, I think there's a large group of people, like especially the older generation, that are familiar with port as a beverage to drink with your cheese, especially in Holland, where I'm from. But I think the biggest challenge is to attract the younger generation. But then there is a bit of a challenge because these people are drinking less alcohol, less highly alcoholic beverages, and less sweet wines. And that's something that port is for the both. So I think one of the things that we found very interesting is to make the younger generation a bit more brand aware by allowing them to drink the still wines first. So maybe focus on fresher styles of white wines. The acidity in the wines that we tasted yesterday or the day before were amazing. So it could be in the rosé that you guys produce. These are things that might work with the younger generation and kind of get them involved or get them aware with, you know, Douro wines, and that could be a step up into drinking port wines. Again, I don't know if we should focus it only on port as a fortified wine, but I think, you know, as you guys are gaining market share or production into the still wines, could be very interesting. I think as well in the fine dining scene, we should, you know, get more sommeliers and restaurant managers or workers accustomed to the fact that port is not only a beverage that you pair with cheese or dessert, but, I don't know, step out of your comfort zone and you know, pair a fortified wine, because there's so much complexity, so much flavor and intensity. I think this could be something, if you get the right type of ambassadors in the countries, to get the sommeliers to really step out of their comfort zone and create a better experience for the guest by, I don't know, doing a 20 years old Tony Port with a main course or a starter. I think we can also focus on, port is very much in terms of branding focused on the style, but it doesn't necessarily focus so much on the production side of it. So I don't know to what extent port is a natural wine, and that's of course a very big trend, but the younger generation of course is very aware of how the wines are made, and if you maybe take more of an outlook like, hey, we produce in a very sustainable way, we are busy with these kind of topics, and as we've seen today, you are, that could be maybe a massive thing to get that out into the world and to gain more attention and interest from the younger generation. And the last point we had was maybe the promotion of Portuguese wines in general, to also uplift port as a kind of side beverage on that. So that were...
All right, amazing. Well, thank you very much. I know it will be difficult at the end to comment on everything. All the points extremely relevant. I will probably just highlight 2 or 3 areas where I think that just to add up and build a little bit on what you were saying. Obviously, the experience more and more in today's, you know this better than I do, that, you know, it's all about the experience that you get. And experience encompasses a lot of what you mentioned, whether that is the message behind how you are doing things, not only why you are doing things, what is your purpose, how do you make it, how much do you work hand in hand with nature to make things happen and get them delivered onto my table. And I think this is, you know, something that's part of the experience. Coming here, understanding the heritage, understanding the, you know, the work you need to have before you can get that actual wine in front of you is something that, you know, we will continue to do and we need to continue to do, and leverage on the experience with food and image of Portuguese wines and the image of Portuguese tourism. I think this is very, very, very important. Another aspect you touched, I would translate it into versatility, which is, you know, and that ties in with the food pairing. Yeah. So you can, the serving or the offering, how did you call it, the different range of wines we have can be extremely versatile. And although, yes, you have the sweetness, as you saw today with the port and tonic, it doesn't need to be there overwhelmingly present, and you can work it around. And at the same time, you benefit from lowering the alcohol content and having a wonderful experience with a low alc product. It doesn't mean that we're not looking into the non-alcoholic part as a potential innovation, but it's not there yet, so it's I would say premature to be talking about that. So yeah, one last thing, because you touched it and I didn't want to leave it without going. We spoke a little bit about vintage, and indeed this is a category that needs to be, I think the ownership of vintage port needs to be taken by you guys, because you are the ones that understand what is behind it. You are the ones that understand. Someone said it's the purest wine. I don't know who pointed that out. It's because you just bottle the wine as it is with everything in it. Yeah. And the wine, it will be aging. It can age for long periods of time. And demystifying the concept of drinking port, you need to have a tongue. You don't need to have a tongue. You just need a butler's thief or a normal corkscrew. And if you're afraid, you use a butler's thief to open it up. You decant it. Yes, you give it the whole story. But you can take the experience to tell the whole story to a table. So it's not an everyday occasion, but it's not an everyday wine. It's just 2% of what we do. And I think that it's up to you guys to bring that category and to elevate it to the value perception that the consumer needs to give it. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Group B. Who's coming up? Mark is playing in his own field. That's not fair.
It can be more difficult. Playing at home, there is more pressure. But what I try to do in the group, once I'm Portuguese, I try to get to the other countries, so to the other nationalities, and try to figure it out what is important in other countries when they are drinking, when they are eating, when they are celebrating. And this is, I think, you do in your daily basis when you are communicating port and when you are selling. And basically, we have end up with words like port wine doesn't need to be complex every day, doesn't need to be difficult. It can be easy. There is a fact that you have in your side, there is sugar. And sugar content, I think, makes the life easier. In certain point. So we should play more with that, because a lot of times we think that sugar is a problem, and sugar can be very good, at least in wine pairings, and to the acceptability from people. And at the same time, in all range of ports that we have, it's like multiple faces. So we have a port for everyone. It's not necessarily a person that needs to adapt to port. Port will adapt to the people. And if you know how to use it, there is plenty of options. From the townies to the ruby side, and nowadays even if it's in smaller production, I think the whites, especially the aged, are doing very great pairings too. And then the dry side as well, that you still have on it. And also in color, I think there is so many colors that we can use. I think wine pairings, it's not just about sugar, it's not just about acidity, it's just not about alcohol. The color matters. And when I'm doing, for example, wine pairings, all the time I'm trying to, if it's possible, to fit the color, the dish with the color of the wine. And I know that if you do it wrong, doesn't matter if the color is the same, but if we do it right, the experience, I think, can be transported to another level, because we eat with the highs as well. And I'm eating more with the highs nowadays because I'm trying to eat less with my mouth. So I prefer the beauty of the things. And then there is the celebration thing. So it's relevant because port wine have been all the time connecting with celebration. And as we have seen when I was discussing in the group, all the beverages from their countries, normally they are associated with celebration. And once you have vintage ports or even colheitas, man, if I go to a restaurant and someone comes to me and try to serve me a port wine from my vintage in my birthday day, or a port wine from the vintage of my marriage, or it would be very difficult if I don't accept, because it's stay connected with us. And sometimes with still wines we cannot do that. Sometimes appears people that they are 50 years old, and we serve a 50 years old still wine. It can be nice, but can be very bad experience at the table. But with port wine, we never go wrong. But well, this is how for us we decided that, or we think that port is relevant. Then the second part that I think is the part that we are not using, it's that they said it, I didn't say it, so they said it. We are not using port enough on the salty dishes, so on the salty side of the life. And 80% or 90% that we eat, it's without sugar. So we need to pair port wine with no desserts, with no sugar. So if we want to sell more port. And I think this part should be better done. And what I mean with better done, it's you do very good job, but sometimes it's about place, moment, and people. And I put it more or less in this order: correct place, correct moment, correct people. And you are used to do this every vintage because you are in the correct place. So you are in Douro Valley, because it's impossible to do port wine outside of Douro Valley. And you know that the correct moment on the harvest, because nowadays you have technology better on the past to select the best moment to harvest. And you need to have the correct grapes to do that, to do the correct style. So it's more or less the comparison that I want to do. It's if we select the correct place and the correct moment with the correct people, like you are doing with us today, and we develop a completely new wine pairing about port wine, this will stay. And we are communicating, let's say, more or less with at least, if you work in a restaurant, 25 to 30 people a day, like trying to sell, trying to make them having a better experience. So if you select the best people for doing it, port wine can spread all around the world in this salty world that we have. Like you have done it with Tawny, with foie gras, I think, we have tasted. So it worked. Served in the correct temperature, in a correct wine glass. I'm sure that 80% of us, we never done this before. I never done it. And I'm from Portugal, and I work with a lot of port wine in my restaurant. But with Tawny, I have never done it. And it worked. So I think it's that. It's what is port business not doing to stay relevant? Maybe we need to do like more effort to select the best moment, like or the best place, the best moment, and the best people to share the ideas to spread all around the world. So you don't need to speak with the world. We need to speak with the correct people to spread the word. Yeah, more or less like that.
Very nice. Very nice, Mark. Thank you. Well done. Great challenges that we have here ahead. I think that we've touched in somewhat the versatility, the diversity, but personalization, as you guys know very well, is one of the main trends everyone expects in today's, especially luxury experiences, to have everything catered to how they picture that moment should be, and that very interesting and very smart detail on the colors, on the type of wine for the right person. You do need to do a lot of obviously background check or work on your customer that is going to be there with you and spend that special moment with you, and it also again enables you to work better on the vintage port story, as I was telling, because besides everything related to the wine, as you rightfully said, you have all the history behind. I mean, when you go back and see, when this bottle was made, this guy was president and we were listening to this band, and this country was European champion, and that guy was being elected as or being named as the Nobel Prize for chemistry, and you travel back in time and you think, wow, this was made by hands that didn't have any idea that 50 years later, 30 years later, 20 years later, because you guys are not older than 20 something, and I'm only 30 also, you wouldn't imagine. So I think this is really, really, really very interesting. Yeah?
May I just ask a question for you guys as...
Sorry, Lucas. Sorry.
For you as I refer to you as the Symington Group now. Where does your biggest challenge lie in terms of your target group? Because I suppose that we heard yesterday that the value of the port wines is increasing, but the volumes are decreasing. Yeah. Understandably, because of course I can see that the port as an investment or as a fine wine beverage is on the rise. But would you really want to capture that market of the bigger volume or the younger generation?
Yeah.
Or is it something else that you...
There is definitely a premiumization trend ongoing in the port wine industry. And if you go back to other industries in time, and I will use a little bit of my knowledge of the spirit side, because it's where I touched the last 10 years of my life, managing that category globally for another business. You saw that when whiskey, before it premiumized, it also declined, and then it premiumized and it boomed. With cognac, exactly the same thing. It was more mainstream, then it premiumized, and then it boomed. We are now in the moment where we are premiumizing, and obviously we need to fight to keep relevant. And keeping relevant means that you need still to keep relevant at the eyes of a certain generation or age group or consumer group, I will probably call it that way, that has that contact and has that moment of contact with port, but you are doing all the effort to amplify the contact with the premiumized categories. So it's a kind of a balanced game that you need to keep really well balanced, because what you want is to have the opportunity to talk to people, the consumer on the premium side. But you can't forget that you still have a lot of contact with the mainstream consumer. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you just need to make sure that you are keeping relevant on both. Obviously, wanting to project yourself on your future, consumers group. So as a last point to address, because it's really, really smart, although as Luca said, port and cheese is a magnificent experience and there's a salty connection. But I do agree that yes, and more, the balance is there. And keeping the balance between sweetness and saltiness is very important. Port wine, and Ant spoke about that, and he will tell you in a little while more. It will open you the world of the Tony ports. And I'm sure he will share with you countless examples of how you can pair that with salty foods, and there's been quite an intensive movement on that. Probably, and it could be I think we could be one of my challenges, and I think it's rightfully up there. That we could and we should challenge more, your counterparts, the chefs, to come up with more and more pairings that could be, used on a widespread manner. You spoke about foie gras. I had that experience. It's a wonderful experience, but there's many others that you can use, probably in different ways, different colors, different temperatures, in which the experience can be really, really amazing. All right, let's move on to Group C. Yay, they made you work. Griffin, you have no option.
I will say before I start that so many of the points made already are very similar, I think, across all the groups here. So we've clearly been spending a lot of time with each other because we're starting to think a lot alike. So to start off, why is port relevant? I would say an appreciation for history while being fluid with an evolving wine industry and spirit industry as well. I think that's really helped port stay relevant. As well as the survivability of the wine, which promotes more responsible drinking. I mean, port is something you can open up and doesn't die immediately. It is something you can put in a fridge, keep on the counter, drink it through the course of 2 months, which I think is something almost any other wine does not have. as well as the sustainability, which we talked about earlier today, which I think we were all very impressed by. The work being done to promote sustainability in the wine industry is something not done as a whole in the wine industry. So to see it being done here, I think is definitely going to keep it relevant in the future. The port is extremely versatile with food pairing as well. We went over that yesterday. The oysters in port is something I have never heard of, but that is something I will have to try. Across the board, everybody who has tried it has said that it is very good, as well as, what was it, whale, I think. So I don't think I can try that in the States, but if I'm ever in Iceland, some port and whale.
Wow.
As far as what the port business is not doing to stay relevant, I would say playing towards a turn in generations and making it more appealing for the younger generations to drink. I think there is an attempt to do it, but finding that successful way of doing so, that's a challenge for sure. The younger generations are very apprehensive about port because of the whole, the view of it, It's typically perceived to be a older generation's beverage. I would say maybe to lean towards lighter styles, make it more approachable with the younger generation. That's what I think we would do slightly differently. And is there really a reason to broaden port? Play towards what everybody here has done so well for so many years. And I think paired with sustainability and what you're doing to promote that, we'll see in coming years that honing in on that and the product that you've all had for so long, it will do very well.
All right, well done. Well, obviously, we focused a few topics here already, and without wanting to repeat, I'll just pick out those that I think that could be bringing some added value comment on that. I think that indeed the pairing can be so diverse, and the pairing can be but it can be more explored, and I really think we spoke about the saltiness, and we do need to work on that more. It's not that we're not doing, but we could certainly do more, because more and more people are wanting to experiment, and again, it's all part of the experimenting, and you really want to try new things. So surprise me, right? I mean, I imagine you get that question every day, right? Surprise me. So what do you have new? And I think if you can come up, and it's a way of reinventing that category. I remember when I was studying in university, and one would drink whiskey Coke and vodka with orange juice, and no one would drink gin and tonic. Gin and tonic was regarded as an old man's drink. I just heard you remind me 25 years ago, okay? Because remember I said I was 30, and it was an old man's drink. Look at where gin is today. I know in the US it's just starting to pick up, but in Europe it's Disneyland. I mean, it couldn't be more premiumized. It couldn't be more premiumized. And we need to continue to work to find that moment, which is to reinvent. I mean, nowadays you go to places where they'll serve you a whole salad bowl on a cup, because it's part of the experience. For some works pretty well, for some others probably it's a little bit overdone. But again, it's on working on that experience, and I think we can do more on that. The sustainability. So sustainability, and without wanting to be at almost 5 p.m. To have a big lecture on that, sustainability is a very important balance of an equation between the three main dimensions. So it's the respect for the planet and care for nature. It's the fixation of people to lands and creating jobs, and adding value to a natural raw material, or natural material in this case, to something that nature is giving us. And so we need that relevance in order to keep people working in this sector, and to make this business needs to enable the companies to reinvest on it and to continue to make these great wines. Otherwise, it may well end up in the moment where people will say, but why are we doing this? Because it's not giving the return it should. That's why the premiumization is something that needs to occur. So it comes out of, on the one hand, market, but also out of necessity. It needs to occur in order to be able, for us to keep this business sustainable. And we do need to make sure that, that the right value for such a precious wine is indeed due or paid by someone who is buying a bottle of these incredible wines. So in the end, they are an experience, and yeah, well, thank you. Lots of food for thought. Of course. I just want to make sure we have time for Group D, please.
Because before,
I'm not sure that's working.
As you said, Portugal, and I said more pressure. So what I said, it's a lot to speaking to the whole world of port, not addressing to Symington.
Yeah.
Because one thing that we need to keep in mind, it's what you are doing here, it's already something that it's, place, moment, people.
Yeah.
So I think it's the rest that is, the rest not like the rest of the wineries, but the biggest part of the wineries, they still attached to that, what said Griffin, like to this boring side of port, to this old man's drink. You are changing a lot. If you see a lot of things that we are recommending, you have done it already. But
it needs to be your overall
exactly.
movement.
It's Douro Valley region, not only Symington Family Estates that will change the world. You can be the first drop, but they need to follow you, or at least to be side by side with you.
Yeah, leadership always has the drumbeat thing to keep on, and then we are working on that. But indeed we need to continue to develop that across the whole sector. All right, thank you, Mark. So Group D, wow. No pressure. You have everyone has already spoken, so you can have the whole room.
Just say I agree.
So I disagree. So why is sport relevant? Of course, we can't deny, especially the huge history that we have, and we have to understand the history to predict what we're going to do in the future, and how complex the port world is, how complex the branding after a port is, how complex the different kind of port styles are. I think that is one of the biggest reasons why port is at this moment very relevant. If you look at the microclimates here in the Douro, if you look at the different kind of slopes, about the aspects, about how intense and how complex everything is, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why port is so relevant, and especially in combination also with the history. I think we all can't deny that about the past and about the history, what crazy amount of time it has been for the port industry, and let us also say the port revolution in that kind of style. Now we're going directly to what are we not doing. First of all, instead of starting very negative, they are already doing, in my opinion, quite a lot, and especially if I look in Belgium. In Belgium, I think the agency of Alice Bown, she's doing a lot in Belgium about fine dining and looking in a different way about food pairing, and instead of always doing things in the sweet style, also looking at salty dishes. So I think they're already doing quite a lot of good things. We also should be positive and not always very negative in style. But of course, there is still, in my opinion, some work to do, and especially I think one of the youngest of the group, and when I have a look at how I started in port and how port was not so super relevant, absolutely, or in the hospitality or at school, port was not a huge topic. Maybe we should start with that and directly go to the schools and maybe have more lessons and more master classes. And instead of having huge master classes for the top-notch sommeliers of the world, maybe we should have master classes for people who want to get in this kind of world, because port was like a 3-hour lesson and it was done, which is a pity. It's a shame, and especially, like I already said, the history is so huge, the complexity of different kind of ports is so huge. Maybe we should start teaching them at the right moment in the right place itself, and especially the way of how I started my studies. Port was something that for the teachers was something that wasn't that super relevant. So, and instead of always talking about school, we could always talk also a little bit about the gastronomic style. And gastronomic style, like we already said, we have two different kind of options. We can focus on port in combination actually directly with the sweet kind of style, and then we can focus on port in combination with more salty or main dishes actually, which is something very interesting also. We could do ports, especially different kind of ports, younger ports, the townies, the rubies in combination with salty dishes. That is something very interesting, but still we can't deny that port is also about a huge amount of alcohol, also a huge amount of sugar. We should embrace the sweetness as a small party, actually. We should embrace the sweetness as something that is sexy, that to end like in combination with beautiful different kind of desserts. And also, so what is something very popular, that is, or something very important, is actually that we should also think about the volume of port that we are pouring in the glasses. We should maybe make it a little bit less and do like subtle double pairings and say like, okay, this is interesting, try it with this, try it with that. So you have like a curious idea about it. It shouldn't be directly like, okay, this is the pairing with port, this is it, and enjoy. We should make it a little bit more, I would say we should make it a little bit less aggressive, and that we can do it with different kind of dishes as a small pairing, because it's huge in alcohol. And if you look globally, like global, what is happening, actually everybody is searching for something with more finesse, more elegance, larger acidity, more acidity. Maybe we shouldn't be completely super concerned about that, but maybe we should like adapt the volume of what we are pouring in our glasses in combination with that. And I really love the trolley also. Trolley is actually like at the end of your gastronomic experience, and maybe we have different kind of ports. And say like, would you love to have a port with your citron, with your lemon meringue? I think that's a way that is maybe a little better than just say like, hello, so this is the end of your gastronomic experience. Would you like to have some coffee or tea? So this is a little bit the idea that I have. Make it sexier, and especially for the younger persons, absolutely make it sexier. And maybe we should think about the young people and ask ourselves like, is there a possibility that we can make a port natural, fresh, and ready to drink?
All right. Thank you very much. Well, I understand that your first intention was to make sure that Nicole wouldn't be out of job. So with the School of Port, and making sure that we're going to have an academy teaching legions of people around the world. So Nicole, you have job for life. So you're done. Well done. But I totally understand where you're coming from, and I agree that we can and we could do more on that side. I was just talking with Ant just a while back that we could leverage more in using the Portugal's more Wines of Portugal banner, also to support that, because as we spoke, Portugal is quite trendy right now from the touristic point of view, and I think that we could use that as a vehicle to do more education. So because it's relevant and it's part of a culture, part of a way, a lifestyle. Well, you also touched on the experience and the appreciation and the servings and providing that experience. It's really. I think you probably have more. Well, you have experienced this much more than I have, but I feel that people are less appreciative of time today. And that makes you want to live everything very quickly and very simple and if anyone lays the whole thing in front of you, you don't have any worry, any trouble to try to figure it out. And stuff like blind dining or blindfolded. blindfolded dining or experimenting is something very interesting because it makes you use other senses and to decode everything that you're going through, whether that's food or that's wine. And probably, doing that sort of experience or probably engaging in a different way will make people enjoy more the time that you need to give to things. And port is a drink that needs, I think, you should enjoy with the right time and with the right, well, as you said, people, place, and context, right? And yeah. So it has to do also with a lot of that. So in terms of your last challenge, it's an area in which Port has been doing some efforts in order to try to enter into, let's call it, a more ready-to-drink world. And it's not that I think Port still needs to do a long way before it gets into that part, because we were talking here that people don't even know about it. People don't recognize it. People haven't tried it, and we need to continue to work in order to make sure that that people understand it. And then probably we need to go there. We did an experiment which was not that successful, but we need to continue to try, and I think we need to continue to revisit the moments in which you consume and the way in which you consume. But guys, you gave it, and I think I'll take that motto for my evening. Make it sexier. I like it. You said it at least 10 times, so we need to make it sexier. So there's the stuff in which we are doing to make it sexier, but I definitely agree that there's more into it, and to make it much more appealing. So definitely, these type of experiences help us exchange ideas. I really loved what we did here and you really, just threw everything out, challenging and, without any fear of saying anything that wasn't right. We also don't fear of saying things that aren't right first time. You don't need to get right first time. You just need to sometimes you just need to sit and listen. And that's what I stood, but, all the rest were sitting and we were listening and we were recording. So I am sure that out of this, great lineup that we put together here, there's going to be, I'm sure that when we get together in a couple of years' time, or 1 or 2 or 3 years' time, we're going to be telling you where we are in terms of these brilliant suggestions and ideas, and we're going to be probably reaching out to you guys in a moment in time to ask you how can we, develop something, how can we leverage it further. But thank you so much for your energy, your thoughts, your passion, and your time and your ideas. Well done. Congratulations, guys. And now you have the sexy part.